Hello and welcome back to the Elephant Lounge. I'm your host Tuesday and I want to thank you for joining me. So welcome back to part 3 of Leaving Neverland and ranting about Michael Jackson. And today I wanted to get into the profile of a pedophile because I think what's most important and what seems to be missing is how a person comes to the realization that Michael Jackson was indeed a homosexual pedophile. And for me, Leaving Neverland was not necessary, although it did provide a lot of detail about the grooming process and what they went through and how they rationalized things to themselves, and then eventually how they came about realizing what exactly happened to them. And I think that's important for people to understand. There's still so many people out there trying to criticize this documentary because it's not something they thought it should be. I'm not exactly sure how that works. It's okay to criticize something. I think everything is up for criticism, but this documentary wasn't about scrutinizing the victims of Michael Jackson. We've had that for 30 years. And I have explained this before, and I will explain it again. We've heard nothing but support for Michael Jackson. And again, the media back then was very pro Michael Jackson, contrary to the fantasies and paranoia of fans of current day. So the most important thing that we need to consider here is the fact that there are characteristics, there are interests and hobbies, age target, employment, Stockholm Syndrome, friendship with parents, and the whole concept of fighting back. We're going to go over these, and they all fit the description of a pedophile, things that we commonly see. We have and develop profiles for a reason. It's so that we can better identify people in our society that are causing problems. And we can bring those people to justice. And it's important that we understand these profiles and how we recognize who a pedophile is. These profiles exist for a reason, much like stereotypes, okay? You might not like them, but there's truth to them. When it comes to a pedophile, we know quite a bit about them. The psychology sciences, they have developed these profiles in order to help us gain a better understanding of who to look out for, who to avoid, who to worry about, and hopefully this will help all of us better understand why so many of us, including myself, know and believe that Michael Jackson was indeed a homosexual pedophile. So let's get into some of the characteristics. I'm going to be reading off an article on thoughtco.com, and I will provide this link on my blog as always so that it corresponds with this episode. The reason I chose this article is because I looked at a bunch of other articles and they all had basically this exact same information, but I felt this article, and it was actually the very first one, and I went through a bunch of other articles and I realized, wow, that first article is actually really good because it's really well laid out, easy to understand, easy to read, okay? Because we're not trying to make this complex. We're trying to break this down. So the characteristics. In most cases, a pedophile turns out to be someone known to the child through school or another activity, such as a neighbor, teacher, coach, clergy, music instructor, babysitter. Family members like mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, cousins, so on, can be sexual predators. Okay, so we all know this. And here are some main characteristics to look out for. Often, the pedophile is male and over the age of 30. Now, in Michael Jackson's case, we can safely assume he was mostly male, although I know he went from being a good-looking black man to a old, ugly white woman, but we'll make the exception for Michael Jackson here. It is believed that he was a pedophile long before 30, but when his first accuser came out, he was indeed over the age of 30. Single or with few friends in his age group. Well, that fits Michael again, because who were his friends? Old white women. Elizabeth Taylor is the main one I can think of. I think he was friends with Diana Ross, maybe. I don't know. But they were all older. He was friends with older people or very younger people. Rarely did you ever see Jackson hanging out with his buddy that was about his same age. That just didn't happen. Some have mental illness such as mood or personality disorder. Absolutely, Jackson had some type of mental disorder. And I say this because he had some type of body dysmorphia. He was constantly undergoing plastic surgery to restructure his face. As I said, he went from a good-looking black dude to a ugly old white lady. And we can talk about the skin condition. Of course, that would be beyond his control. I certainly don't blame him for that. But to do so many procedures that your nose caves in on you, that's a mental illness. We know he had also turned to drugs later on in life, and there's always a reason for using drugs. It's usually to mask some other mental illness or problem. And we know that Michael Jackson always painted himself a victim. If married, the relationship is more companion-based with no sexual relations in the early stages. While Debbie Rowe states unequivocally that they never had sex, and as far as Lisa Marie Presley, I don't buy it. Everybody in the staff said that they slept in separate beds, and if you look at their dynamic when they were together, it was much more friendly. There was nothing lovey-dovey. They were not doting on one another. We all have seen the kiss. It's uncomfortable and kind of disturbing. They are often vague about time gaps in employment, which may indicate a loss in employment for questionable reasons or possible past incarceration. I don't think Michael Jackson was arrested prior or incarcerated, but he did his own thing. Okay, so we can't really say one way or the other, but it is doubtful that Michael Jackson is the type of person that would have been able to hold down a 9-to-5. We can safely say that. So his employment indeed had gaps, as it were. He would work and then he would take time off, as is the case of most entertainers. You know, you can take that how you want to take it, but in any case, you cannot deny he did not work a stable job. It was in entertainment. They often talk or treat children like adults. Well, I can't totally comment on this, but if we are to believe the victims, it's very clear he treated them as an adult would treat another adult by performing sexual acts on them, having them perform sexual acts on him. That's not something that should occur between an adult and a child. That is adult activity. Interests and hobbies. They are often fascinated with children and children activities, appearing to prefer those activities to adult-oriented activities. And I'm going to play a clip here.
You're saying that you climbed that tree?
Yeah.
How far do you climb up it?
All the way to that kind of spot up there, kind of like a deck where it's like a bed. I love climbing trees. I think it's my favorite thing. Having water balloon fights and climbing trees. I think those two are my favorite.
Don't you prefer making love or going to a concert, or you really mean that you prefer climbing trees and having a balloon fight?
Yeah, water balloon fight.
And you prefer that to anything else?
Well, as my pastime fun, can't compare it to performing. But other people play football, basketball. I like to climb trees.
And I think that speaks for itself. He prefers climbing trees and water balloon fights. Hardly the activities of an average 40-year-old male. That was the interview, by the way, with Martin Bashir. They will often refer to children in pure or angelic terms, using descriptive words like innocent, heavenly, divine, pure, and other words that describe children but seem inappropriate and exaggerated. So let's play another clip.
How does what look?
How the fact that you...
Know why people think sex. They're thinking sex. My mind doesn't run that way. When I see children, I see the face of God. That's why I love them so much. That's what I see.
And here again, this is how he describes children, constantly talking about their innocent, heavenly, divine, pure. We've heard this from Michael Jackson countless times. Again, the profile of a pedophile. They have hobbies that are childlike, such as collecting popular expensive toys, keeping reptiles or exotic pets, or building plane and car models. Hello? Do I even need to say anything more? Of course he had expensive toys. He had all the latest gadgets for the kids. He kept many exotic pets. Bubbles being one of them. How many people do you know have a chimpanzee? How many people do you know have a giraffe or a zoo? He built an amusement park, for goodness sake. Specific age targets. Pedophiles often have a specific age of child they target. Some prefer younger children, some older. He certainly loved boys age 7, 8 to 12, 13 in some cases. That was his area. And when they reached a certain age of maturity, he was on to the next little boy. And that's where he would spend his attention. Often his environment or special room will be decorated in childlike decor and will appeal to the age and sex of the child he is trying to entice. His entire Neverland ranch was decorated in a childlike manner, okay? It was all about attracting children. It couldn't be more obvious. Again, Michael Jackson dangled this in our faces. Many pedophiles often prefer children close to puberty who are sexually inexperienced but curious about sex. Bingo! Do I need to say more? Employment. The pedophile will often be employed in a position that involves daily contact with children. If not employed, he will put himself in a position to do volunteer work with children, often in some type of supervisory capacity. The pedophile often seeks out shy, handicapped, withdrawn children, or those who come from troubled homes or underprivileged homes. Yes, on all counts. He then showers them with attention and gifts, taunting them with trips and desirable places like amusement parks. He had an amusement park. Zoos. He had a zoo. Concerts. Well, he had his own theater. The beach and other such places. We know he took these kids on trips to Disney World, Euro Disney, all over. He took them to all over, took them on tour with him. Pedophiles work to master their manipulative skills and often unleash them on troubled children by first becoming their friend, building the child's self-esteem. They may refer to the child as special or mature, appealing to their need to be heard and understood, to then entice them with adult-type activities that are often sexual content, such as X-rated movies or pictures. Okay, he absolutely did this. He had pornography in his room, the room where he allowed these children to sleep with him in his bed. They offer them alcohol or drugs. Jesus juice, anyone? And they do that to hamper their ability to resist activities. He absolutely fed children alcohol. Stockholm Syndrome. It's not unusual for a child to develop feelings for the predator and desire their approval and continued acceptance. This is exactly what we've seen repeatedly, especially with James and Wade. They will compromise their innate ability to decipher good and bad behavior. Yes, they compartmentalize that. They absolutely do that, ultimately justifying the criminal's bad behavior out of sympathy and concern for the adult's welfare. Yes, that's exactly what happened here. This is often compared to Stockholm Syndrome. It's when victims become attached emotionally to their captors. Yes, we know about Stockholm Syndrome. So why is it such a stretch for these fans to understand that this type of dynamic can create confusion and misunderstanding about emotions and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? With sexual abuse, what a lot of people don't seem to understand is, yes, this person has befriended you. They're letting you trust them. They're becoming dependent on you, or they're at least giving that perception that they're dependent upon you. And then they're showing their love. This is how we express our love with one another. We have to keep it a secret because people won't understand, but this is how we express our love. And that expression is with our private parts. And our private parts feel good. And that good feeling, it gets confusing because you're feeling good, you're agreeing to this activity, but at the same time, there is something wrong with it, though you don't quite understand it. Okay, adults that get themselves into sexual relationships have all sorts of confusion when you hear about these people with friends with benefits and how that doesn't work because emotions become involved. People start feeling things or not feeling things, or one person starts feeling things and they don't know if the other person's feeling things, and it becomes all sorts of confusion. Now imagine a child trying to rationalize what is happening and what's going on. They can't do it. They cannot understand any of those things. People protect their abusers all the time. They do this all the time. Right now, thousands of women in this country are telling police officers, "No, officer, he didn't hit me. I fell down the stairs." Right now, thousands of children are telling their social workers, "No, nothing happened." This is common. It takes an average of 20 years for victims of this type of sexual abuse, this grooming. It takes them an average of 20 years to come forward because they cannot grasp what has happened and they feel shame. They feel ashamed because they, in many cases, went along with it. They didn't say no. In their minds, they think they allowed it to happen, when in reality, a child can't consent. That's why we have these laws. We know children do not understand these dynamics and they cannot consent legally. Their minds aren't even developed. And to sit here and criticize Wade because he was an adult when he testified. Excuse me, he was not yet 25. And that's when we know the brain is fully developed. And who in the hell at 22, 23 years old has figured everything out? When I was in my 20s, I was a complete idiot, as most of us were. We didn't know anything. You think you know everything, you don't. And to expect or demand that from Wade, that is short-sighted and ignorant. And quite frankly, it's irritating and it pisses me off because there's people out there that should know better. Friendship with parents. Many times pedophiles will develop a close relationship with a single parent in order to get close to their children. Once inside the home, they have many opportunities to manipulate the children using guilt, fear, love to confuse the child. This is exactly what Michael Jackson did, without a doubt. He stayed over at some of these children's homes, including Jordy and James Safechuck, that we know of. He stayed at their homes. He stayed with Wade at one time. If the child's parent works, it offers a pedophile the private time they need to abuse the child. And of course, we know that Michael Jackson would isolate these children. And like any sociopath, because he was a sociopath, he tried to turn the children against their parents. He tried to isolate the child. That's what they do. Pedophiles work hard at stalking their targets and will patiently work to develop relationships with them. It is not uncommon for them to be developing a long list of potential victims at any one time. Many of them believe what they are doing is not wrong and that having sex with the child is actually healthy for the child. Michael did not believe what he was doing was wrong. He says emphatically, "I would never hurt a child." Well, that's because pedophiles don't believe that they're hurting children. They simply don't believe that. They think they're helping them, or that it's healthy, or that it's okay. What's wrong with sharing your bed? There's nothing wrong with sharing your bed. There's nothing bad about that. He was trying to rationalize it. He was trying to normalize it. He knew what he was doing was wrong in the sense that he had to hide it. But at the same time, he wanted us to believe that what he was doing was normal. That sleeping in a bed with a child is normal. And it's not normal. It's abnormal. Almost all pedophiles have a collection of pornography, which he did, which they protest at all costs. Many of them collect souvenirs from their victims. They rarely discard either their porn or collections for any reason. Michael Jackson had a ton of porn. A lot of homosexual porn. He did have child erotica. I don't care if it's legal. There were naked children. There were books that were created by pedophiles for pedophiles. He had those books. There was an inscription with his writing in the book. Okay? And this idea, oh, well, they just sent me this stuff. I don't know what they sent. Bullshit. It was in your suitcase by your bed. Of course he knew he had it. If somebody sent you a book of naked children and you were not a homosexual pedophile, would you keep that book? No. I'd find the return address, I'd call the police and say, hey, some psycho sent me a book of naked children. At the very least, I'd send that back and say, no thank you. That's ridiculous. The excuses that you have to continually make and bend over backwards to excuse this. No, this is the profile of a pedophile. And as we have seen, he has hit every single mark. Every single mark. One factor that works against the pedophile is that eventually the children will grow up and recall the events that occurred. Often pedophiles are not brought to justice until such time occurs, and victims are angered by being victimized and want to protect their children or other children from the same consequences. And what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years when more victims come out? Because I can almost assure you they will. Are we going to call them liars too? Is that what the fans are going to do? They're going to call them liars? Say, but you defended him. Well, as we've already said, it is not uncommon for people to protect their abuser. It happens in almost all types of abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual. People do it all the time. There's nothing shocking about this whatsoever. And ultimately, this is the end. This is the profile, and he fits every single point in this article. Every single last point is hit. Now couple that with a hallway that sings when you walk down it, and his security in his room. Couple that with multiple accusers, multiple payouts. Put the picture together. And you can sit here and you can poke holes all you like, and you can talk about how you didn't like the way someone did this, or they didn't behave this way or that way. None of that matters when you put the whole picture together. And I'll be back. I might touch upon this topic again. We'll see, because there's still a lot of crap out there, but there's other things I want to talk about. This weekend was pretty insane, huh? Today was pretty insane, especially. Michael Avenatti. He's being charged with some felonies, I believe, and it looks like he had a co-conspirator. Oh, who was that guy? Mark Garagos? Oh God, I know that name. Let's see. He's defending Jussie Smollett. And that's right. He was also an attorney of Michael Jackson.